You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Tanoum, and these are today's top stories. At least 50 people are killed and 94 wounded in the suicide attack in the Turkish province of Gaziantep. President Erdogan blames the Islamic State. UN envoy to Syria Staffan de Mistura calls for truce again around the Syrian city of Aleppo, as activists report more deaths in fighting around the country, mainly in Aleppo and Hasaka. And U.S. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump reaches out to African American and Hispanic voters, vowing to restore law and order. At least 50 people were killed when a suspected suicide bomber detonated his explosives among people dancing on the street at a wedding party in the southern Turkish city of Gaziantep. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said it was likely Islamic State militants who were the perpetrators of the attack, the deadliest bombing this year in Turkey, which faces threats from militants at home and across the border with neighboring Syria. The local governor's office said more wounded were still being treated in hospitals around the province. At least 12 people were buried, but officials say other funerals will have to wait because many of the victims were blown to pieces, and DNA forensics tests will be needed to identify them. An Iraqi national was kidnapped in East Lebanon by unknown individuals. The national news agency says Mohammed Bassem Ali al-Bahrani was kidnapped in Baalbek's Solah neighborhood and taken to an unknown location. Kidnapping for ransom is common in the Baalbek region, a haven for fugitives who enjoy local or political cover. UN Special Envoy to Syria Staffan de Mistura has called for a truce again around the city of Aleppo, as activists report more deaths in fighting around the country. 33 people were reportedly killed in fighting in Aleppo on Saturday when airstrikes targeted the city's southern edges and intense battles raged. Meanwhile, in northeastern Syria, 25 people were killed in airstrikes in Hasaka, as activists said government forces attacked the mainly Kurdish city for a third day on Saturday. Kurdish fighters advanced in the flashpoint city after a Russian mediation bid failed to halt clashes with pro-government forces. Today marks the third anniversary of a chemical attack that killed up to 1,400 people in the opposition-held area of eastern Ghouta, just outside the Syrian capital, Damascus. The West has accused the Syrian government of having fired missiles containing the toxic sarin gas, which affected thousands more people, including many women and children. But the government denies this. Here's a special report by the Human Rights Watch.
The first images that emerged from Ghouta is a video showing a room full of children dead, many of them in their pajamas, without a single injury on their bodies. And immediately we knew that this was a crime of a completely different magnitude.
يعني مين ضل من عيلتك؟ مين ضل من عيلتك طيب؟
بس بس
Ghouta is completely surrounded by the Syrian government. We knew we could not go on the ground, but that doesn't mean we can't carry out our investigation. So we began with the videos that appeared on YouTube. Then over Skype, we interviewed the activists and the eyewitnesses and the first responders and the doctors. We saw symptoms which indicated that people had been exposed to a nerve agent, the foaming at the mouth, the lips turning blue, the pinpoint pupils. We identified a rocket which is not in the standard identification manuals. So we contacted the activists inside Syria and we asked them to take photographs with a measuring tape of all of the different components of this bomb. We immediately posted them on a specialized network we have developed consisting of military experts and weapons identification experts from around the world to ask them to help us identify the weapons. Identifying and reconstructing the weapons used in the Ghouta attack was of fundamental importance because these are very large rocket systems. They have never been seen in the hands of opposition fighters, and they will be very difficult to hide. Our investigation indicates that both the 140mm rockets and the 330mm rockets used in this attack were in the stockpiles of the Syrian regime. We have the transfer records to prove that, and we also have videos of them being fired by Syrian soldiers during this conflict.
Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte threatens to pull his country out of the UN. More details coming up next. Welcome back. You're watching the news here in English on Future Television. The head of a newly formed council in Yemen has vowed to establish a full government in the coming days, a move described by ambassadors of 18 nations supporting UN-backed negotiations as unconstitutional. Saleh Samad, chairman of the Supreme Political Council, made the announcement on Saturday in an address to tens of thousands of people who rallied in the capital Sana'a, calling for an end to the 16-month conflict. At the rally, Samad outlined the council's plans for running the war-ravaged country following the breakdown of the peace talks earlier this month. Rescuers pluck hundreds of migrants from vessels off the Libyan coast, but for one young Somali man who died during the journey, their help came a little too late as 2016 starts to look like the deadliest year yet in the current migrant crisis. Diane Hodges reports.
Organization pluck over 200 migrants from their dinghies in the Mediterranean. They were found floating adrift in several vessels off the Libyan coast. For one 19-year-old Somali man who died on the journey, their help comes too late. The migrants are from Somalia, Libya, Bangladesh, Ghana, and other countries, all of them trying to reach Europe. They were transferred to an Italian Navy ship for processing, the latest in some 100,000 migrants to enter Italy via Libya this year. In Sicily, the bodies of 2 young Syrian girls and 4 adults who drowned when their boat capsized arrived at port, along with 300 migrants who were also rescued. Carolyn Haga with the Red Cross describes one survivor's terrifying ordeal.
Everybody was thrown into the water. He had a family, he was holding his 2 children, and his wife was trying to stay afloat.
The International Organization for Migration says some 3,000 migrants and refugees have perished in the Mediterranean already this year. That could make 2016 the deadliest year yet in the current migration crisis.
U.S. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump has reached out to African American and Hispanic voters, vowing to restore law and order and revive industry and agriculture in an effort to raise support from America's largest minority groups. Trump attacked his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton, who won the nomination in part thanks to her large victory margins among minorities in nearly every state.
The people hurt most by our open border are low-income Hispanic and African Americans who are competing for jobs and community resources against new arrivals. Our open border is also being used as a recruiting tool for criminal gangs, creating a growing gang problem right here in the state of Virginia, where large numbers of gang members are in our country illegally, right here in the state of Virginia. We are going to end this chaos and restore peace, law, and order to our land. Spending my money, but I'm fighting for you. In recent days, across this country, I've asked the African American community to honor me with their vote. I fully recognize the outreach to the African American community is in an area where the Republican Party must do better, and it will do better. The GOP is the party of Abraham Lincoln. And I want our party to be the home of the African American voter once again. Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo on new coal leases on federal lands.
A Ukrainian lawmaker releases more details of what he says were secret payments made to Paul Manafort, Donald Trump's former campaign chief, who resigned the same day the new details emerged. Manafort was brought in June in an attempt to bring a more professional touch to the campaign, but has struggled to rein in Trump's freewheeling ways. Ashraf Fahim reports.
More details have emerged of Paul Manafort's alleged financial dealings in Ukraine shortly before the Trump campaign chairman announced his sudden resignation. Ukrainian lawmaker Serhiy Leshchenko released what he said were itemized payments from a secret ledger, amounting to over $12 million given to Manafort over 5 years. Money, he said, for financing various activities of the political party headed by Kremlin-backed former Ukrainian leader Viktor Yanukovych. Funds for carrying out exit polls during elections, buying computers, and conducting research. The largest single payment, $3.5 million.
The basis of these payments are totally against the law. It's corrupt basis, and money were not under taxation in Ukraine. I believe in the U.S. as well.
Manafort denied any impropriety after the allegations first surfaced on Sunday. But the allegations have fueled speculation about the Trump campaign's possible ties to the government of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Manafort stepped down on Friday after already being demoted by Trump in a shakeup this week of his top campaign staff.
Moving on to Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo's main opposition alliance has rejected talks with the government of President Joseph Kabila over elections that were due to have been held in November but have been delayed, and called for a general strike on Tuesday. The opposition wants Kabila to end his 15-year rule in December as mandated by the Constitution, but authorities say the vote cannot be held until at least next July. And the top court said Kabila can stay in power until the election is held. The strike call issued on Saturday represents a significant escalation of opposition action in a country where about 40 demonstrators died in anti-government protests over the issue in January of last year. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has denounced the UN after it called for an end to killings blamed on his war on drugs, saying he might leave the organization and invite China and others to form a new one. 2 UN human rights experts last week urged the Philippines to stop the extrajudicial executions and killings that have escalated since Duterte won the presidency on a promise to wipe out drugs. About 900 suspected drug traffickers have been killed since he came to power after winning the election on May 9.
That during her term, and for a longer period, what have you done for the world, Mr. United Nations? At yung tao na expert ninyo, let me, if he comes here to tell him straight, Mayor Duterte would ask only 5 questions to prove that you're stupid. He said, I do not want to insult you. But maybe we'll just have to decide to separate from the United Nations. United Nations, if you can say one bad thing about me, I can give you 10. But I tell you, you are an inutil. Because if you are really true to your mandate, you could have stopped all these wars and killing.
Cabinet secretaries, will there be vacuum of leadership?
Look, I cannot go after. Repercussions, I don't give a shit to them. They are the ones interfering. You know what? They should have started it with the protocol. No, they would have said somebody to talk to me. or at least the rapporteur. You do not go out and just give a shitting statement against.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. At least 50 people are killed and 94 wounded in a suicide attack in the Turkish province of Gaziantep. President Erdogan blames the Islamic State. UN envoy to Syria Stefan de Mistura calls for a truce again around the Syrian city of Aleppo, as activists report more deaths in fighting and around the country, mainly in Hasaka and Aleppo. And U.S. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump reaches out to Hispanic and African American voters. Those are your top stories for this Sunday. I'm Lina Tamima. Thank you all for watching.